And hello, once again, it's Jim Caldwell here from the Kentucky Educational Development Corporation. I am the Marketing Director, Public Relations Manager for our wonderful organization. And this is yet another podcast. And this time around, we're going to talk a little bit about learning. And we're talking about a specific type. So we're going to be diving into something that's really getting a lot of attention in education right now, but not because of just test scores or because of the way students are learning to think differently. You probably heard the phrase, like I said, perceptual learning. You've heard that floating around, I'm sure. Well, with the success happening like down at Sublimity Elementary, we're talking about a school that made a massive state jump in rankings. I mean, massive. Educators say part of that was all due to changing the way math and problem solving were targeted. It's a fascinating subject here, and that's what we're going to try to unpack here today. So, what exactly is it? Why does language matter so much in math? And could this kind of thinking change how we teach students moving forward? All very interesting topics and all wrapped into one. And we are going to go right now and check out some of our friends from around Barberville right here. We've got them all hanging out with us right now. Fellas, I appreciate y'all being on with me here today and taking time to talk about such an interesting subject. Before we get going, let's talk. I want each one of you kind of give a little intro and what kind of background you've got with this type of learning and educating.
Okay, my name is Don White, and I have brought this brand of teaching and learning to some school systems in the state, and Barberville Independent Schools. It happens to be one of the schools that is using this style of teaching in their right now the middle school section of the school. And what I'm saying is that this is just a brand name, Perceptual Learning. This is something that started in the mid 60s. So this style of teaching has been around a while. It just hasn't been defined very well. So let me just give you a kind of an overview of what this is. It's reimagining traditional education so that it is re-imaged by the way of perception. So perception is a key word. To keep this metaphor consistent, perception is the chisel or the paintbrush that creates skills of reading, math, and writing. Students learn by the way they see and hear. You want students to say, hey, I see it now. That's very energizing when students say, I see it now. So what that means, they probably have finally understood a concept they had been wrestling with. So the cognitive term for this is perception. So this is something that I hope this comes through clear today, that it's all about perception. And so I happen to start with the Corbin Independent Schools. I think it, guys, was after Christmas. So we've only been doing that here, say half a year. And so Alex and Trey can introduce themselves. So they're the two proteges of this, and they can give you their personal reaction to this style of teaching.
So I'm Alex Payton. I'm one of the middle school math teachers here at Barberville Independent. I've spent about 12 years total in classrooms over the last several years, everywhere from grades 1 up to grade 8. So I've got experience with different age levels, and I've gotten to see different types of learning, different teaching methods, and different ways of learning, and how students learn just at different ages. And just in the short time that we've been implementing this here, I've seen a drastic change in learners' mindset. So compared to what I've seen in all the other grade levels, the other strategies and stuff that I've experienced before, it's not been anywhere near the significance that we've had since introducing this to our students. So I'm ready to get into it and talk about it a little bit, and I'll pass it on over to Mr. Chestnut down there.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Mr. Chestnut, Trey Chestnut. I'm a fourth-year teacher here at Barberville Middle School, and a little bit about me. I came in option 6, so I graduated with a non-education degree from Union College, or now Union Commonwealth University, and I've always been a math mind. I think on the ACT in high school, I scored a 33 on the math portion. On my praxis when I took it, I got a perfect score in math. So I know math. I'm able to do math, but for some reason I could not teach math. I was not very good at articulating or conveying or whatever. There was some sort of disconnect between my brain, and I could not communicate it to the students. And it was frustrating to me. I would dread seeing testing time come around, or seasonal diagnostic, I-ready diagnostic, because I knew that I was not going to see the results that I wanted to see. And it wasn't because of my students. It was because I was not doing a great job of conveying that. I wasn't efficient with my time. I wasn't clear. There was just a lot. And so one of my favorite qualities, my best qualities, is that I'm coachable. I've always wanted to be coachable. I take constructive criticism very well. So me and my principal, Mr. Roark, we developed a good relationship with that. And so he came to me one day and he said, Trey, I'm going to bring in Don Watt from Perceptual Learning. He's going to sit in your classroom, and he's going to help you out, and he's not going to make you feel bad. He's going to encourage you, and he's going to coach you, and he's going to build you up. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to try whatever at this point. And like I said, I was leaving work tired, frustrated, because I just felt like I did not do a good job of teaching math that day. Well, Mr. Watt comes in my classroom, and from day one, he says, you need to do more formative assessments. You need to let the students dictate your lesson instead of some curriculum or some, whatever. And we'll get into more about what that means later on. But I've already seen results, and like Mr. Watt said, we've only been implementing this for about half the school year. And so we've not really had a chance to see its full effect, but I've already seen a lot of growth out of my students. For our I-ready diagnostic, usually in years past, my indexes were in the mid to low 50s. This year, my 7th grade index was in the upper 70s, ever since we implemented this. The middle schoolers took the PSAT. The middle schooler and high schoolers in our district took the PSAT this March. Our 7th grade scores, which is what I teach, was higher on average than the 10th grade scores on the same test. So this perceptual learning has completely changed my entire outlook on education. It's completely changed the entire way I view teaching math and the way I do teach math in practice. So that's a little bit about us.
This is a fascinating subject because, as a student myself many years ago, I had trouble, especially younger, when I was much younger, of just kind of grasping the idea. Math was hard, but years later, when I got into my first career, which was weather, you had to learn a lot of weather. You had to learn a lot of formulas. You had to learn a lot. But at that point, when I got into that, it started making a little more sense to me, because at that point, I was seeing it in real world kind of conditions, because what we were talking about every day was some of those high-end formulas. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, well, that's what that means. And that's what kind of grabbed me and shook me into reality many years later, and when I got into college as an older man. But that's kind of how it all played out for me. So for somebody that has no idea what this is, I want y'all to kind of break it down step by step, what you do to introduce it to students, and what it means, what this, as you call it, your branding, for this perceptual learning, what it's all about.
Well, first of all, most kids memorize. And they think math is just memorizing formulas, and they don't realize that it can be perceived as a language. All of a sudden, I think Trey and Alex both agree with me that language is probably the most important thing to teach, especially at the very beginning. That math is a language. And sometimes that is overlooked, because most kids think of math as just adding 2 + 3, things like that. But they don't realize that we're really learning a new language here. And then when they realize that, it gives them a different perception of what math education is. And there's some new words that come into play that we call it lexicon. You know, every profession has their lexicon, whether it be in meteorology or medicine, law. Every profession or activity has their lexicon. So we got to make sure kids know what some of the words really mean in this language of math. But it's really doing things a little backwards. In other words, where traditionally we just make the lesson, the student fit the lesson. So this is the basic, I guess, philosophy that's different here. Perceptual learning, we try to make the lesson fit the student instead of the student fit the lesson. And so we have to have a beginning point. And so this is where some new words come into. Formative assessments. You know, when you give kids a formative assessment, this is what creates the lesson for us, because it really gives us the things that kids are struggling with. And so instead of teaching them things they already know, we want to teach things that they don't know. This is just an efficient use of time. So some other lexicon, rote memorization. That's the big enemy here. So many kids think that, well, I got to memorize all these formulas to be a good math student. Well, that's not true. Tactical problems. It's like the game of chess. If I know all the moves of the pieces, but I don't have any strategy for those moves, I'm not going to win a game of chess. So there's tactical problems, you know, those problems that have the instructions of saying solve or simplify or find the sum. These are tactical problems. But the strategical problems are the ones that are really the application problems. And this is where the kids really learn the math, when they see the application of math. But you have to have the tactical part. We need to know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. But how you apply that is probably more important. Percepts and concepts. What makes an idea? How do we create an idea? Well, it's from things we see and hear. So just knowing that we have to show and tell kids those concepts that we're trying to build is really, really important. But like I say, formative assessments are what forms our lessons, and the summative assessment is what ranks the kids. It gives the kids the ranking of how they score. Go ahead.
I'll jump off of that. The way we approach it from our side of it is we look at it as in a set of two phases. We have a constructive phase and an instructive phase. We've talked about that a little bit, but what those are is our constructive phases, like you just said, is our formative assessment. Now, when our students at the end of the year are on the KSA, or even just in as they go out into the real world, they're going to be facing different types of problems. We tend to teach in this linear method to where we're structured by topics, and one week we'll teach this topic, and the next week we'll teach the other topic. What we're doing now is, through our constructive phases, we're giving formative assessments that assess students not on specific things, but we're taking all of the standards or all of the skills that they're going to need throughout this year and need to know by the end of the year. We're assessing them now, and we're saying, okay, which of these skills do they need to focus on right now? Which of these are a must? And that's that builds our lessons for the week. And then we get into the instruction phase, and that's where we start to bring this in, and we're teaching more in depth. We're teaching we're teaching students how to think, and we're teaching them to helping them get a deeper understanding of the content rather than a surface level, because we've noticed that when we teach this linear style and going topic by topic, they learn just enough a lot of the times to get them through that topic and do well on the test and get an A. And then the next week, and then they get to the end of the year when we're reviewing all the topics, and they're like, I have no clue what happened back in August. So by doing these formative assessments, they're seeing them every week. And by teaching it more in depth throughout between assessments, they're getting it more in depth, and it's not that rote memorization like we talked about. It's in depth and it's knowledge to them.
Let me piggyback on what he said earlier with the formative assessments. Think about it like this: if you go to a doctor with flu-like symptoms and they put a cast on your arm and send you on your way, the doctor didn't do his job very well. When we're teaching linearly, what we call linearly, with just chapter 1 this week, chapter 2 next week, chapter 3 next week, that's kind of what we're doing, is we're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. We're not really treating what the student needs. So in a way, the diagnosis is almost as important, if not more important, than the treatment. And so what we're doing is we're letting the formative assessments guide our instruction based on what the student tells us with these formative assessments that they need. That's how we're going to take the instruction to them. That's how we're going to create our lessons and move through the year, like Alex said.
Fellas, this just sounds like, I know it's not revolutionary because you said it was, Mr. Wright, you said it was back in the idea was around back in the 60s. But what we've got is we've got more people maybe willing to push that. Is that what you think it is, that's trying to get this means to teach individually, as you said, almost? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, I think in the 60s, I was innately a good math teacher. And if I had to tell people what I was doing, I couldn't formally explain to them exactly what I was doing because it was an intuitive action. I just did this kind of naturally. I guess that gift was given to me. So when people would want me to tell them what I was doing at that time, I would say, won't you just come and watch me? Because I don't think I had it defined well enough in my brain to articulate what I was doing. So it's taken me many, many years to understand what I was doing back in the 1960s when I taught. If you'll pull up the overview, make sure that we have a good overview. If you let the audience see the overview, let me just quickly go down to these bulleted points. The what. Okay, the what is teach the cognitive skills of seeing and hearing so that math is understood. So just saying the right things to the right kids, showing them the right things, you're really creating an idea instead of memorizing little tricks and schemes to get answers. The how. Replace the next chapter syndrome. How we let the textbooks drive the lessons. When you get through a chapter 1, we start chapter 2, and we teach that lesson to the kids whether they need it or not. So the textbooks are kind of driving the lesson instead of formative assessments. So you replace the next chapter syndrome with formative assessments so that student needs are revealed through them. Now, guys, anything y'all want to interject anything here, just butt in. Now the philosophy is we make the lesson fit the student instead of making the student fit the lesson. I think that's the basic idea behind this. And that's the difference in this brand of teaching, perceptual learning, that we're making the lesson fit our student instead of making the student fit the lesson.
So can I give an example of this?
Sure,
Alex.
I agree.
I teach Algebra 1 as part of my job too. So my students this year, I think we're like in 3rd or 4th grade when COVID hit. And so, with virtual learning, they didn't get as quality, I guess, per se of math as they needed. Because it's hard to learn a language, and that's how we view math. It's a language, right? And so it's hard to learn a language through a computer. And so it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it was. And so I was teaching. I can't remember exactly what I was teaching, the subject, the concept I was teaching, but I understood quickly that they could not add fractions. They didn't know how to add fractions. They didn't know how to multiply fractions. They didn't know how to divide fractions. They couldn't do fractions. They couldn't simplify fractions. And so I took a week out of my Algebra 1 curriculum this week or this year and dedicated a whole week to fractions, to going back, because that's what the students were telling me they needed. That's what I could tell based on the formative assessments that I was given, that they had no business solving systems of equations this week because they need to know how to simplify a fraction. And so the philosophy there was that the students were telling me what they needed, and it would have not been fair to them for me to just skip over that and move on with Algebra 1 concepts, because that's what they needed. Sorry, Alex, you go ahead.
No, you're good. And kind of to jump off that too is like still with the philosophy. We've had these conversations about what this looks like as far as lesson plans, right? This style it's nearly impossible to go in and type up a detailed lesson plan. Now, what we can do is take those formative assessments and use them to tell us what we're teaching that week. And we may use some of these, we may find some questions that we'll use during class, but all these students are different types of learners, and our questioning and our instructions looking a little bit different than normal. So that makes it more fun. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
As a teacher, it makes
Absolutely.
it more fun because every single class is going to look different. When we start to get into a question that is deep understanding, and we're trying to get students to get their thinking on it, all 30 students in our classroom have a different mindset, and then the next 30 students are all going to be different, and it makes for a fun time while teaching.
Yeah, it makes every lesson a unique lesson, because every kid has a unique problem. So you're matching their uniqueness up with your way of teaching, and so every class, even though it might have the same title, you're teaching a different approach.
Most of my formative assessments had 10 to 12 questions on it. I gave one or two a week, so I was getting real data in real time to dictate my lessons. And there were times where if I was given a 12-question formative assessment, if 75 or 85% of students got a certain concept right, I wouldn't even talk about that concept that week. I would talk about the concept that 20% of students got correct, because that's where the biggest need was in that particular group. And I could get the same formative assessment for another group of 7th graders, and my lessons be completely different that week based on the data that I got off that formative assessment at the beginning of the week. So this is a really exciting way to teach, because it's honestly, it's not so monotonous of, today I'm teaching this, tomorrow I'm teaching this next thing that is just a step above what I taught yesterday, and then day 3 is another step above. Every day is a new lesson. Every class period is a new lesson based on what that particular set of students need. I love it.
And Trey, I think you mentioned the word, it made you more efficient.
Yes, for sure.
It made you more efficient at what you were doing.
Yeah.
Going down to the 4th bullet point on the overview. Early on, like I said, I was doing this style of teaching in the 60s, even though I couldn't tell you what I was doing because it was innate. It was the preference then to help students build an idea over teaching tricks and schemes to get an answer, like keep, change, flip, PEMDAS, and all the little tricks and schemes we learned to get answers that are just superficial learning. So even then, the emphasis then is even more dynamic now, because I'm emphasizing the same thing. I want to build ideas or concepts for kids, not teaching memorization. So understand the why leads to deeper insight and understanding than memorizing the how. So nothing is more, like I said before, nothing is more energizing to me to hear a kid say, "I see it now." So that's the reward of explaining things well, or showing and telling things well to a student, is hear that reaction that the kids have when they say, "I see it now." And the key perception here is probably, even though there's a lot of perceptions, but the key perception, like I mentioned before, is that math as a language. And like any language, vocabulary is of utmost importance. You go to a doctor's office or a lawyer's office and you hear a different vocabulary. Well, the same way is true in math. And so when kids realize that the thing that's probably causing the most trouble with their problem solving is vocabulary. So many kids, I ask, why did you miss this problem? Well, they'll point at a word or a notation and say, I didn't know what this meant. So it changes your emphasis in the classroom on how you teach math. It's just not teaching kids the mechanics of giving an answer through adding, subtracting, all the little algorithms that you learn to get an answer. So there's a bigger picture.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I've got a question to go along with this right here. So how early should we start teaching our kids like this? I mean, how early should they be getting it in the classroom?
Okay, my student ranges from second and third graders to college kids. So I have a big, broad range of students that come to me for help. Right now, I'm helping a little girl with her MCATs, and she's getting ready to go to medical school. So one moment I'm helping a teacher that's struggling with the practice exams. I had one lady that had failed her practice exam 9 times because she couldn't do the math portion. And then I found out that she was 38 years old, and the things and she told me she was a straight A student in middle school and high school, but she was 38. I said, well, I know your problem. You probably did a lot of memorizing back then, and what you memorized is not there right now. She said, absolutely. So she took it the 10th time, and math was her strongest subset score. Okay, now the why, the final bullet on our overview. Definition, relevance, and continuity are considered the musts in math education. Rote memorization is too shallow to last and does not facilitate any of those above that I mentioned: the definition, relevance, and continuity. Do you have something you want to?
Well, when we saw, he asked about how early you were talking about the age range. Like he said, he goes all the way and teaches this with second graders, but we can go all the way down to kindergarten, first grade level. When they're starting to learn their basic addition, the 2 plus 3, right then is where we need to start teaching them. We're finding the sum of 2 and 3.
Yes.
It's not just 2 at 3 or 2 plus. Using that term sum, or when they start learning subtraction, using the term difference. Those should and can be introduced very early on in a child's educational journey.
I mean, if we're viewing math as a language, that's our claim. I have a 8-week-old daughter. When am I going to start exposing her to English from the time she was born? I think it's important to expose your children and any student to this language of math as early as possible. If we really want them to be fluent in this language called math, we need to immerse them in that language as quickly and as early as possible. It's my opinion.
And math, let's talk globally here for just a second. With the way math is around the world, sometimes the U.S. as a whole kind of struggles, we kind of fall behind. And I think it's because we have some of this criteria that we have to just stick to, and just keep going, as you've said, with the lessons. But it sounds personal. It sounds more hands-on. We always talk about that, and it's hard. I know, but this just sounds like a better way for anybody to learn any particular subject in a way like this. Is that what I'm picking up on here, guys?
Yes, I've had so many parents that would bring their children to me to be a math tutor for them, and so they would come back a few weeks later and say, Mr. White, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because my child is reading better now, doing better in social studies. I said, well, I'm probably teaching them more how to think than just math skills. So there's a bigger picture involved in this and this reason that this covers reading also. Some kids, lots of kids I help with the ACT or SAT tests, and they would come back and tell me, guess what? My biggest improvement was in, and more times than just a few, they would say my reading improved more than anything. So did that really tell me a lot? That we're really not emphasizing the right thing in a traditional teaching format. We need to teach kids how to read. When you use your punctuation, your parentheses, your brackets, how those correspond to commas. You pause at a comma. So but I put lots and lots of time just teaching kids how to read math, because it's the word and notation that causes the problems. It's not that they can't do the algorithms. It's just that they just don't know the language well enough. And so that was a big aha moment for me, is that I probably haven't emphasized that enough. When I was in the classroom, I would have a word wall, and I'd let the kids bring words that they find in math and do their definition, and we stick it on a wall. But what it did emphasize them every day, that this language, the words that we're learning in this language, are very, very important. And first thing I knew, the walls were full, and we were tacking them onto the ceiling tiles. That's how big this language is. But it's true in any activity. Tennis. When you hear the word love, so there's a good example. What does that mean in context to tennis? It's the language that I think that most teachers overlook, that they're really teaching a language here, and I think that is where the success comes from this approach to teaching math. But it's really the bigger picture here. You're teaching kids how to think. Because some of my best math students come back and told me, said, Mr. White, you have made history my favorite subject now. I said, that's really interesting, because they see patterns. That's really fun. I consider that really interesting, that some of my students, my best math students, came back and told me that I made history more interesting to them. So I was really amused with that.
That is kind of funny. That's a funny term, but you're right. It's a language. It's a communication thing. For you two, you're seeing this every day, and what I mean is kids that are a little more distracted than they used to be. Where they're so distracted because, while we've been sitting here, my phone's gone off 5 or 6 times or more, and I've had to look down because I'm afraid I'll miss something for work. So they are distracted too. They're distracted because they're doing other things on there. I'm distracted so I won't get fired. So that's kind of what happens there. But do you find that a challenge too? But bringing this model in, does it kind of, I don't know, does it change up that whole dynamic too, with them always being, maybe the shorter attention spans?
I think so, because from my standpoint, when I'm teaching from a curriculum, it kind of gets boring for me. I'm the teacher. I'm the one getting paid to do it, and it's the thing I love doing. And for the student, that may not be as motivated. I can only imagine how monotonous it must feel for them to know, well, yesterday I learned how to add fractions. I guess today I'm learning how to subtract fractions, and tomorrow I'm going to learn this. And, with this kind of instruction, like every day is new. Every day is a new lesson. It keeps me on my toes as a teacher, and it keeps me excited and interested. And also, from my perspective, it keeps me from having burnout, because it's not so repetitive every single day. It's not so monotonous. I keep going back to that word monotonous, but that's really, I think, a good word to sum this all up. Is it keeps that out of this. Every day is a new lesson, and for the student, you're still gonna deal with distractions. But it's easy to motivate kids with this, because I've seen this in my Algebra 1 classroom when I teach it. I have a student who he works, I guess with his dad as a mechanic, and he'll say, I'm not going to college. I'm going to be a blue collar worker. When am I ever going to use this as a mechanic? And I told him, I said, honestly, you may never solve a system of equations when you're a mechanic. I said, but I'm not only teaching you how to solve a system of equations, I'm teaching you how to think. I'm teaching you how to solve problems and to think critically. And so it's important to do this because one day if my truck messes up and I don't know how to fix it, I may bring my truck to you. And if you just look at it and say, I don't know how to do this, take somebody else. You know, I can't determine what the problem is, what's wrong with your truck, I can't fix it, then I'm up a creek. But if I can teach this kid how to think, and if they can catch on to that, then this is a life skill. This isn't just something they're not gonna use after these 4 years of high school. It's a life skill, knowing how to think and knowing how to problem solve. So it has been a challenge, but it kind of takes care of itself because it's not as monotonous, and you're teaching these kids how to think, life skills. So
yeah, with that too, and I go back to, we've talked about the philosophy, make the lesson fit the student instead of making the student fit the lesson. So when we identify students' needs, we're in the classroom. When we're doing this instruction, Chromebooks are put away, workbooks, paper. A lot of the stuff is put away. They may have the paper and pencil for notes and stuff, but there's nothing that we use most of the time for them to just copy and write and fill in the blanks or whatever. So with that, I'm able to center myself in the room, and I'm having a conversation with my students. I'm not always up on the board writing things down for them to copy. I'm having a conversation with them, and we're talking through these types of problems because we are getting a deeper understanding of the math. But like he said, we're also doing these problem solving types of problems to where it is teaching them life skills that they're going to need. And like we've mentioned this being fun several times because we can change things up. A lot of the times, I'll be honest, some of the biggest distractors in the classroom can be some of the athletes. They like to kick back and be cool. So when we're able to make our lesson fit the student, what we can do with that is I like to take problems and make them sports related. And like when we were teaching data, finding the average, well, a lot of the kids were like shaking off if I'm asking them to find the mean or find the average. But when I could tell students, hey, this is how you track your own points per game, that their ears perk up and they really start to tune into me a little bit more. So we gear it more towards the students, and that really helps with the distractors, and we can get some buy-in from students through that.
See, traditionally when we teach rational expressions or fractions, we usually do addition. The next thing on our plate is subtraction of fractions. Then we go to multiplication, then division. So very linear. See, the way I teach it is, and kids like it because it connects better. I teach this all in one group because if you know how to add fractions, you know how to subtract fractions, because subtraction is adding opposites. So it makes things connect, and it's an efficient way of learning. If you know how to multiply fractions, you know how to divide fractions, because division is multiplication by reciprocals. And notice I put these words in there, and so a lot of time kids don't know what reciprocals are. So here's a chance to teach language again. So you teach this all together, and that way it has continuity, it has connection, instead of teaching it in fragments. When it's broken or have fragments, kids just can't use it. They just can't recall it quickly enough, because all your summative assessments are very random. That they just jump around asking random questions. So there's no linear flow. So we need to teach kids the same way that they are tested. If they're going to be tested in a random fashion, we kind of need to teach them that way. But so that's the art of the teacher, is how do you take these things and make them flow together. So if we teach fractions, I don't do it traditionally. I just teach adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division all together. And so kids love that, and it's efficient. See, I like to tell teachers that when I train you, I want you to have all the content covered by mid-year, by December. And then and then spend the rest of the year for mastery. Go back and retest them and see what you have to go back and revisit or reteach. And this is really efficient. And sometimes you're able to go beyond your standards. Mentioning standards now, I'm a big believer in standards, so don't get me wrong here. But I don't like standards when they kind of box a teacher in. Say, I don't teach these standards because my kid's in my class, and even though the standard might be needed for those kids that are behind, and some other standards might be needed when kids are kind of ahead and want to go forward, we don't want our standards to box us in and afraid to get out of those math standards that we're stuck with. But don't get me wrong, I have a son that's a dentist, and he better have standards in his office or I'm not going to sit in his chair. So I do believe in standards. But sometimes I don't believe in how they're administered. Yeah.
It's really easy to sacrifice the quality of your lesson just to make sure that you teach a standard, just for the sake of teaching a standard, right? Like I've seen, rushing through a certain lesson or rushing through a certain topic just to make sure that I cover a standard, and it's not productive and it's really not efficient for anybody. It would just be better for me to teach what is needed and then get to the standards when it's time to get to them.
That's a key word for us, is like we keep talking about it, but is efficiency, because like these HQRs, the curriculums, they're mapped out and they help teachers stay on track. But we were talking the other day, like specifically one of the ones that I had used had a topic on fractions, and it taught one lesson, one full day for adding fractions. The next day was subtracting fractions. Then the next day was adding fractions with unlike denominators. Then it was subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Then it was add mix. It's taken 2 weeks for us to teach and assess this topic using these traditional ways. Whereas, like he said, we teach fractions all together, and we can get it done within a day or two and reassess it to see, which part of that were students not getting, and what needs retaught.
That's the beauty of the spiral review that we keep talking about. Is I don't expect 85% of my students to get a certain concept down by week 1, but if it's 30%, maybe by week 3 it's 45%, and by week 6 it might be 55%. So if I take a couple days on, like you said, fractions, and I don't have the results that I want by the end of the year, that's okay, because we're doing the spiral review with formative assessments, and so I might teach the same lesson 2 weeks from now and get more results than I did now. So that's the beauty of this, letting the student kind of dictate their needs and help us guide our lessons to that.
See, it brings some new words in. This pedagogy, this way of teaching, brings some new words in. Like when you teach fractions, the traditional way hardly mentions units. See, when you see 3/4, and you say, well, you ask a kid, what's the unit here? If they haven't been trained this way, that really causes confusion. What is the unit when you see the fraction 3/4? Well, the unit is 1/4. 3/4, it means you got 3 units of 1/4. And so you can see then that this can be seen different ways. 3/4 can be seen as 3 groups of 1/4, which is multiplication. It can be seen as addition, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So how kids see and hear is of utmost importance in learning concepts. This is called perception. How kids see and hear is how you build an idea or the concept. The other thing is multiples. It is a really a nice word in this language of math. This comes from multiplication. When you see 3 times 7, that means 3 multiples of 7 added. So you're defining multiplication in terms of, you're making that connection from multiplication to addition. And when kids see it and hear it this way, they have a more in-depth learning. Listen, my kids that I work with, that I give private lessons to, in middle school, I see a lot of 35s on the ACT math. And I haven't had a perfect score yet in middle school, but I've had several 35s. And I expect kids when they work with me in the middle school to grow in their mid to upper 20s. So I know it works because I have too many success stories to share with people. That I know this style of teaching works. Now I just got to get it out there and let people know. So that now the burden's on me. Can I articulate it well enough to get the public to understand what this style of teaching is? Because it's not traditional.
I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you a question about that. About you're talking about the students and what your expectations. In the 20s for the ACT, and then what has been the biggest success for you on that particular scale? Not necessarily the ACT, but have you had a student that came to you and their parents said they're struggling, they can't do it, and they were almost failing? And then they came to you and they got with you, and after that, all of a sudden, they're passing that class. Do you have some like a personal example? Any one of you, do you have a personal example of that?
I got many stories. My biggest success story. I have a child that came to me. His parents called me when he was a fourth grader, and said, "Could you work with my son? He's having difficulty in math," and he was a fourth grader. I said, "Sure, let me find a time I can work with him." And so I found a time, and I started working with him, and I found out that he was probably special needs. He couldn't count to 10. He didn't know basic colors. And so I said, well, this is not in my field of expertise, teaching kids like that. Special kids are in the low area and the high area. He was kind of in the low area of special needs. And so I was getting ready to tell the parents that I don't have the qualifications to service your child's needs. But the little boy just loved Mr. White. And I just didn't have the heart to tell him that I wasn't going to work with him. So this month, I stayed with him. He learned a lot of tactical work. He learned a lot of how to get the answer. He had difficulty with the language to say no more than. How do you say that in math? No more than, or at least, those kind of questions. He had a difficult time of translating the language from English to math in those sections. But you couldn't put an equation in front of him that he couldn't solve. But well, the most thrilling moment I've ever had is when he called me when he got to be an 11th grader, and he got the scores back from the ACT, and he told me he made a 25 on the math. Well, that 25 was his 36, and we celebrated that. Well, to make a long story short, he just graduated from the University of Kentucky with a major in computer science. And I'm afraid that if he was left in the program that he was in, he would be accommodated so much that he might not been able to go to college. So that's one of the most thrilling. I got a lot of stories to tell you, but that's probably one of the most thrilling stories that I've experienced. And he just graduated from UK with a major in computer science.
That's fantastic. It is, guys. What about you two? I mean, I know you're younger in the run with it, but have you all seen some kind of a dramatic change in a student after pushing this out there for them?
Well, I've noticed just a couple students in particular come to mind that there were certain topics. I mean, like we talk about the fractions, that's a common thing we bring up, but that's a common struggle with students. We've had these conversations where we've gotten into a deeper context with it and not made it so superficial, but got more in depth with it. And they'll come up after class and be like, that makes a whole lot more sense. And, when you have those students come up to you after class and say things like that, they really mean it, and it makes everything so worth it. I mean, just little sentences like that when they have those little small wins.
Yeah.
That's all we've gotten to notice so far. But like I said, we've not been implementing this long to have a long-term success story. But I mean, just within one lesson, we can see a student go from here to here. I mean, it's incredible.
It's where we're teaching a new lesson every day. You get those stories almost daily. I mean, of a student that may struggle, or even if a student that is really gifted in math but just struggles on a certain concept. Every single day you see a kid come up and be like, I really understand this now. I get this now. It's not as confusing now, or I'm starting to get it. And it's growth, man. Seeing the growth and seeing a student say like, oh, I get it now, or I can see it better now. It's so energizing. It's so motivating, and it's what we work for. That's what we're here for. So, we could tell you success story after success story individually. It's amazing. It really is.
I have a little microcosm that I use a lot. A lot of times I give programs to elderly groups, Parkinson's groups for their cognitive activity, and of course I got to be careful when I use the word math, because it's a four-letter word for most people, and that when they hear the word math, they kind of run from it. But right here is a microcosm what I'm talking about. If you showed this, I don't know if you can see this on the camera. If you see this, most people would read that as subtraction. Can you see this? It's 8 minus 3. Okay. Let me show you how the language. Let me show you how the language changes the whole perception. Okay, when you say 8 minus 3, you're really saying a transitive verb. It says from 8 you're subtracting 3, and the traditional student reads that as 8 minus 3. Okay, now if I change the language a little bit, now notice how the perception changes. If I show you this and say this is 8 and a negative 3, so I change the transitive verb to an adjective that's describing the 3. That all of a sudden we perceive this then as addition, and if we proceed as addition, all of a sudden we can see it this way: the sum of -3 and a positive 8, by just changing the word from minus to negative. So that's just a microcosm of how important language is in math. And if you just make students conscious of that, it just makes a different student out of them. And this has a ripple effect. It makes kids read better. It makes them write better, because all of a sudden they have this mindset of paying attention to those details that sometimes are just not pointed out. So this is the thrill. And as old as I am, I still haven't taught my best lesson yet, and I hope I leave this world with that thought. I haven't taught my best lesson yet.
I love that.
And this is the fun, and this is the nobleness in this profession of teaching. It's helping kids form their way of their future life.
That's right, because what they learn there, it sticks with them. I mean, it does. All right, we've got just a few minutes left here, and I'm just going to ask a blanket question for all three of you. Let's imagine that the governor or some lawmaker or whomever watches this podcast, or listens to it, however they get it. What do you want them to take away from it? What do you want them, and maybe other educators that maybe aren't as apt to change, to go for this kind of lesson plan or this structure? What is one thing you want them to take away from it?
Y'all want to take that first?
I don't mind to take it. One of the things that we've taught, part of our lexicon that we use a lot, and something that we really put in the classroom, is the idea of tactical and strategic skills. We hit on it a little bit, but I want to go into it because I think it's pretty important. But when we are assessing students, and when they're I mean, just in general practice, we have tactical and strategic type skills. The tactical skills are their hands-on, they're basic operations and those types of things. Whereas the strategic skills are the more in-depth questions where they're having to learn how to take their tactical skills and put them into use. Like, we like to use these metaphors, and I'll say, like, if you're a basketball player, you can dribble well, you can shoot well, but you get into a game and a team comes at you in a 2-3 zone, you have to have a strategy to attack that. So that's how we are in the classroom. Is we're teaching these students how we're going to teach them their tactics first, or we're going to assess them first to make sure they know how to do those, and then we're going to teach students how to take what they know and put it into these types of problems to where they're having to strategize and think about what they're doing and what skills do I need for this problem, what skills are going to help me solve this, and be successful in this. And that's a mathematical skill, but it's also a life skill. It's students and people in general have to be able to use what they know in their daily lives. I'll pass it on over to one of these students.
So for me, the biggest thing with this, the biggest thing that I've took from it for myself, putting this in my own classroom, is efficiency. And everybody wants to be efficient. That should be the goal, is efficiency for everybody. Efficiency, I want to be efficient with my resources in life, efficiency with my money in life, but in the classroom, we need to be efficient with our time and with our resources. And the need-based approach that we're taking here, it makes it really efficient. I mean, that's the main thing, is efficiency. And if we're wasting time, we only have 170 school days. You take the snow days out of that, you take the special programs that we have out of that, the field trips we have out of that, we really only have probably 140, 150 days to teach this stuff. And so efficiency is crucial. And the biggest thing that I've seen in my classroom, and the biggest thing that I would want to leave somebody with, is that perceptual learning is efficient. And that's, in my opinion, the formative assessments guiding the lessons and letting the students dictate their needs, tell us the needs so that we can create the lessons to target those needs. That's the most efficient way to teach, and I'll never go back. So efficiency for me is number one.
Strategy and tactical is really two good words. Your military academies that are training officers, their really focus is on strategical warfare. Then you bring in the cavalry, so to speak, to do the tactics. So it's really important to understand the difference in strategical learning and tactical learning. So I heard someone say just the other day, I think it's one of our groups, maybe it was Andrew, that said when you think about this, we're really teaching kids how to be proficient, not proficient, novice and apprentice on our state testing. Because if we just continually feed them work like, simplify, solve, all the problems that you do, and stay away from these DOK, these depth of knowledge problems like the word problems, we're really teaching kids how to be apprentice and novice.
Can I hop in here?
Sure.
If we look at the released items that the State Department puts out for KSA every year, in the middle school level, about 80% of those problems are strategic. So about 80% are word problems. So if we're only teaching the tactical abilities, we're teaching kids to get about 20% of the problems right, which is novice and apprentice. So
this has been a fascinating topic, you guys. It really has, because I can see how it would have possibly changed my life early on. Because once I got into seeing, like I was telling you in the beginning, once I got into seeing how it was related, and this was this and that was, oh, these water droplets mean this many clouds, and once you see all that, it just kind of pulls it together. By adding that language into it, right? So I mean, it's a different world. I appreciate y'all. Is there somewhere that folks at home that are watching this, they can find more information on maybe how to reach out to learn more Uh, Mr. Wright, I know you're retired, but you're not retired. You still out there doing a lot. You're doing plenty. You just don't go to the classroom every single day of the week like you once did. But you it's maybe somebody else needs some math help like that. I mean, is there any way that they can get in touch with you all?
Yeah, my website is under construction right now because I did teach under the brand name of Clear Math. So Carnegie Mellon out of Pittsburgh bought that trademark from me. And so, but it's probably a good thing because I took the math out of it and they now made perceptual learning because I didn't want people to think that it was just a math thing. This is social studies. This is how you think in general. And so I'm just using the tool of mathematics to help kids enjoy their social studies better, and enjoy their science better. But I do have my website under construction now because I've had to change the name of it to Perceptual Learning. But this is just a brand name. But you can contact me through these guys, and I can give you my cell number. You can reach me through my cell number or through the Barberville school system, either one. But I do this with other school systems. I do have other school systems that I work with. But having these guys on board, we should be able to reach out and do more schools in our state.